Well, in truth, I'm a little embarrassed because I had trouble remembering how I first met him. And it was about 13 years ago. And frankly, I had to ask Joy, what had happened, because I couldn't remember. And they went through a house that I built in Roswell, and she liked the plan. And so they tracked me down and came to see me. And it was a house, one of our plans that we designed. And so we reworked that. Stephen Fuller put the exterior on it, and we built a house.
Well, we met about 18 years ago. They were doing a vacation lake home up in South Carolina, and then from there I think we just had a mutual respect and continued doing projects as things happened, and so we've just worked together for a long time.
Originally I met the Dyers in 2010.
We were in the middle of helping them with a renovation of their lake home. I just remember them being very pleasant and easy to work with.
I got involved in the old cobblestone development really from its inception. Been working with Bill Grant, the developer and builder, for quite a few years.
I didn't really understand what Tim had in mind, and very early on in that process, I said, draw me an illustration. And so we did, and he hand drew this illustration, and the house was beautiful, and it was within the context of the neighborhood, English country. It fit exactly our definition of what we want. And I'll be honest with you, that's precisely what this house looks like today.
John and Joy visited Hendersonville back 4 Christmases ago. They pulled out the preliminary plans and showed me through the house, and they were so excited, and it was just so fun to hear them talk and hear about their dreams.
In our design process, we work through the plans in numerous iterations. As I said earlier, designing a house like this, there is a lot of moving parts. There's a lot for a client to process and understand. So we spend a great deal of time meeting, walking our clients through the plans, talking about what the rooms are, the dimensions, the flow, how things relate, the scale of things, and trying to help them understand the process. So typically one house will fit on one sheet of drawings. The length of this house, actually we had to divide the house into 2 sections, and we have a match line, if you will. Our plans in general are very detailed, not to the extent of 100 sheets. I think that does speak to the magnitude of this project. One of the requests was to have the pool and gardens off the main level. Well, this lot slopes high from the street down to the creek. And we kind of joked and said, well, we can do that, but we're gonna have to put in some pretty serious walls and backfill it. Are you up to that, John? And he kind of laughed and said, yeah, let's do it.
Well, first thing I thought of when I heard about the project was I was very excited because I had worked with the Dyers before, and I knew they were passionate about landscaping. So when clients passionate about landscaping, it makes my job a heck of a lot of fun. We initially saw the property, walked the property with the homeowner and the architect, Tim Adams, and we kind of all felt about which way we wanted to approach the design. When we look at a piece of property, we look at its physical attributes, the topography, the tree cover, and try to assess which is the best way to put a house on the lot. Usually that involves designing where the car is going to go, because the car and the garage drives everything. So when we walked away, Tim went back and started designing the house, and with that in mind, he initially just started putting the garage on the right side of the house. When you come up the hill towards the property, your first impression of the house was just the garage wing and not the house. And so since the topography was similar on the other side, it just made sense to flip the house so that my first impression of the house was the front of the house, which is basically the floor plan you see right now was the same plan he came up with, but it was flipped in the other direction.
We always feel like a successful project's about collaboration, and that's not only T.S. Adams Studio, but that's having the right builder on board, the right interior designer, the right landscape architect, and then really paramount to that is the right client. The Dyers were an incredible teammate and collaborator. They were on board, they were committed to the project, which is really important. I think ultimately they didn't at that point perceive the true magnitude, and maybe we all didn't. But in order to have this project come together like that, it takes a willing team and people, all of us willing to learn, willing to go the extra mile, willing to put our egos aside and say, hey, this is what the Dyers, what we're trying to do for them. Now let's work to put it together.
Collaborative effort here is so intense to do a house of this caliber. We're in constant discussions with both the architect, the builder, the landscape contractor. I mean, all of us are talking all the time not just at one point of the project, but almost through the entire process.
Collaborating with all the craftspeople was really interesting. It's always fun to get in there and see what they do and why they do it. I learned so much, just working with them.
Everybody contributed so much more than I think they would normally do. It was fascinating to see everything come together.
As far as the team process goes, I think everybody got along great. I couldn't have asked for anything more. The architect certainly starts the project, and we come in quickly behind and start to figure out how the site plan works together. So the house is sited, how the driveway will work, retaining walls and grades. There's a lot of collaboration at the very beginning.
Well, I think with this particular architecture, the woods were darker. There was a lot of wood detail, especially in the living room and the dining room and those areas. So we kind of worked with that, but then added her pop of a little bit of color.
I think one of the bigger challenges in a project like this is making sure that we've really addressed everything. And there was a great deal of work and energy put into kind of preparing the plans, preparing the information, with pressure to get started because there's an anxiety to get the project moving and off the ground. But I think we pushed back enough to say, look, we got to get it right on paper, and then everything else will flow.
Well, the biggest one is the enormity. This is huge. This is a beautiful lot, but it's a very tough lot. The detail in this house was probably the biggest challenge, but that's the biggest beauty of this house, quite frankly.
This project was impressive in its own right. We put a lot of energy into our designs. We put all our thoughts on paper ahead of time so that the builder isn't trying to execute something by themselves.
Some of the challenges that I faced with doing this project was just a lot of it's the length of time the project takes, and you work in chunks of time. And then later on, we are introduced back into the project, and okay, this is changing now, this is going to be tweaked, and where they want a vegetable garden. So things are always evolving and changing, and trying to manage all that it can be difficult at sometimes.
Listening to what the Dyers ultimately want, and we're taking that, we're trying to expand on that and give them something more. For example, the brick and the stone on the house. We probably went through, I would say, close to a dozen iterations of trying to find the exact stone and the exact brick that would work well. We've become known for our level of detail and our attention to detail.
Me personally, I feel like as an architect, our role is to take a project from raw land in conception through the design and really design the pieces, put them on paper, detail them, think through the components in the best possible way we can so that when the contractor, in this case Bill, starts working, they've got the information they need to make the right decisions, to know when to ask us questions. This house embodies a lot of what we do as an architect. I think another thing that is kind of a hallmark of my architecture is natural light. And one little anecdote, when we were meeting with John at their last house, we were talking about their house and the layout, and one of the comments the Dyers made is it's dark. I commented to them, well, you've got porches and here's why. And I said, I promise you in this house you'll be able to read a newspaper without the lights on. Even with the dark wood, the dark trim, we were able to still bring in natural light. And a lot of that's attributed to the fact that the house is not really a very deep house. It is intentionally long and narrow, which allows light to come from two directions. In this instance, I'm sitting in the stair hall, and I've got natural light behind me that's up high, so it's kind of pouring down into what would typically be a dark space, but on the other side, through the living room, we've got light coming in that way.
In order to make these landscapes sort of unique, we try to work with a couple of things. One is the architecture of the home is so important because the style of the architecture of the house can be evoked in the landscape design. So we try to pick up off the physical features of the architecture and the style of the architecture to give a unique look to the landscape.
One of the challenges we faced, and I worked a lot with the builder on this, was how we handle our stormwater, how we handle our septic system. And it's not the most glamorous thing that people think about, but a lot of attention went into that, and the collaboration between us and the builder to figure out how best to handle all this underground infrastructure on this site.
Joy has a love of color and fabrics and textures. And so we were able to kind of intertwine those through this house, still respecting the architecture because that was so prominent. But then where it's possible, we added her little bit of whimsy. And so I've just learned kind of her style. I think the biggest accomplishment was being able to work with the amazing architecture, but also find John and Joy's personality in the home.
To put it simply, I'm most proud of and happy that the client is so happy. And I think they made it so that it was fun for all the consultants as well.
I think the biggest accomplishment for this is that John and Joy are happy.
Kind of the hallmark is the front door, the front entry loggia with the limestone surround with the hand-carved crest that was really inspired by Joy and John's personal crest. We kind of infused the two and created something which is then reflected in the leaded glass windows.
You walk through the front door into the foyer. From the foyer, you see the dining room, and you can look into the living room, and that's pretty much the most formal area of the home. So that's where we really worked very hard with the architecture and the Tudor kind of style that was already being developed. But we also added in some colors to kind of brighten it a little bit so it wouldn't be as dark as a normal Tudor home.
Upon entering the Dyer's house, one thing that I think was very intentional is the idea of drawing you through to the backyard. So you come in the front door, straight ahead, you look through, and you've got a beautiful focal point, which Alec did a wonderful job of capitalizing on. But then as you turn to the left, you see a magnificent dining room with a spectacular gilded ceiling that really draws your attention.
And then as you walk on through to the kitchen, that becomes a little brighter, a little more playful. And we were able to add kind of the watercolor feel that she loves. As you come into the master bedroom, we wanted that to be just a brighter, lighter feel. And for her sitting room, so that's where we pulled in just, the apricots and corals and greens and yellows and just really tried to brighten the space.
In a general sense, I think you're going to see a wonderful, beautiful English manor-style home with a landscape that reflects that architecture in the same English manor vernacular. The approach to the front of the house, we pick up some of the physical attributes of offsets on the architecture of the house to come off and create, for instance, in the front of this house, a low hedge that creates a front yard or a room, if you will, that you enter from the driveway. If you look in the back behind me, you'll see this is a completely separate room. This room is completely isolated, not just because we wanted to do that, but because it's actually elevated 10 feet in the air so that it related more to the main floor of the house.
The landscape for this property takes its cues from the architecture. So we work, when we design the landscape, we take a look at the architecture, where areas of focus are, where areas that we need to screen. So there's definitely different areas of landscape throughout the property. There's just a variety of spaces that they have to enjoy this property.
I think the master bedroom that we're sitting in, I love the colors that we were able to bring into the room and the airiness. I also love the powder room. It's such a simple, small, little intimate space, but it just has a real dazzle to it that I enjoyed working on. Two of Joy's favorite items in the home are the green Italian glass chandelier. And then as we were shopping for plumbing, we came across a red acrylic sink.
Truthfully, I can't pick, honestly. I mean, there's so many of them, and they're so unique. I mean, I'm sitting here right now looking at the stairway. That's probably the most unique stairway I've ever built. And, and the detail and the finishing of the wood. I mean, it's superb. And the beams in here, and these are really old pieces of wood. And the house is filled with old wood that came out of old barns in Ohio and Pennsylvania.
I think in this house there's a lot of areas that I could call my favorite spot, but the stairs kind of are near and dear. I actually drew these, which no one knows I don't do very often. Early in my career, I did a lot of that because I didn't have the support that I do now. In the end, I think it's reflective of just the whole character of the house.
My favorite part is really the garden that's right behind me here. The elevated, I call the elevated garden back, pool terrace. I just love the detail back here. The level of detail on both the landscape and hardscape is great. And when you're doing a very enclosed space like this, every detail counts.
The garden setting is my favorite area. I'm still doing work around the property, so just the other day I was out here and I had to take a swing through here just to see how things are.
The greenhouse was interesting. We sourced the greenhouse from England. Most of the most beautiful greenhouses and glass structures are manufactured in England. We were allowed to pick the color of the materials and so forth. Purchased it, then it was purchased and shipped over to the United States. We were in charge of assembling the foundation of the greenhouse, and then the company that actually made the greenhouse comes over personally with their crews and assembles it on site.
The greenhouse is one of my favorite parts of the site. Originally, the greenhouse was shown to be a custom-built greenhouse done by the architect. And as we started talking about it, there was a company in England that can build and source the greenhouse. We worked with Bill and John to select a greenhouse and tweak the design of the greenhouse, because the way it comes standard wouldn't have fit well with the architecture that we have around us with the house, the retaining walls that we had designed. So we worked back and forth with the greenhouse supplier and tweaked their design on how it worked.
John obviously has an extensive wine collection, so we talked about a wine cellar. Through the design process, I came up with this idea of meandering down a tunnel. The steps are intentionally not perfect. If you'll notice, there's not a rhythm like you would on normal steps. So you're forced to actually slow down. You're forced to kind of perceive that you're going somewhere different. And just that movement of going down steps when you've already come down steps into the basement, to me, started to put it down into it is this kind of secondary room catacomb that we discovered under the house.
Understand, we built the last house, and in the last house there's a wine cellar. Nothing like this wine cellar. And it's a wine cellar, and it's lined, there's a tasting room, and then next to that it's lined with the racks for the wine. Are you happy you're done? No, I'm not happy I'm done. This is a way of life for 3 years. That's all we did for 3 years. I'm not happy I'm done because I would like to do it again. It was a great experience. They're great folks. The truth of the matter is they're the nicest folks I ever built houses for.
Well, I think just the legacy of their input and the enjoyment and all the heart they put into the house, and how everyone working on this house really felt the same way. The Dyers are so respectful of your opinions. They always give you theirs, but they listen to your opinion, and we kind of work through it. And they're just so appreciative for all the different craftspeople, and just enjoy the process.
Looking back 50 years from now, I really hope that this project is a legacy, that not only to myself, but the Dyers and everyone who's involved. In 50 years, it will still feel that way. It will actually become more graceful as the materials age, as the landscaping grows.
We knew that this wasn't an ordinary home, and we knew that John and Joy weren't after that.
When we design, we try to look at a kind of a 20-year horizon, because by then, usually things have to get remodeled and renovated. So 50 years, it's hard to say. I would like to see this place 50 years from now, but I have a feeling it will look like it's been here for 150 years.
This is one of my favorite projects I've worked on in my career. Most of that goes to the Dyers. I give them great credit for of how this project went because they trusted so much of us as the design team to make little decisions that didn't really need to be, that they needed to be involved with. So as we worked with the architect or the builder, we knew that they trusted us to make the best decision for them and make this project happen.
I think the entire process was inspirational, pouring through old books of how things were done at one period of time and trying to bring that into modern day.
Well, it should be a positive experience. This is a home, and it should feel that way, and it should feel very comfortable and natural and not overwhelming.
It's slap beautiful. It really is. It's a beautiful house, and everybody who sees it is just in awe. It's one of those experiences you have in your life that you are pretty confident you'll never have another one.
The level of detail that we accomplished in this home really is a hallmark of my career.